core, if you go across the country, you'll find these shops everywhere. So bring those together and allow them to operate with autonomy. We feel like there's a lot of value to other fabricators beyond us, beyond the businesses that we could acquire or partner with. And so we feel like we have something to offer, and there's a business model there, and anytime you can help others and have a positive economic model, I think it's something worthwhile.
Welcome to the ProFab Alliance podcast, a podcast about inspiring and bringing value to business owners in the fabrication and machining industries. I'm Casey with Captivate Content. We're one of the sponsors of this podcast, and sitting across from me is Matthew Nix. He is a co-founder of the ProFab Alliance and also a fifth-generation owner of Nix Companies, a fabricating company based in Poseyville, Indiana. To start off, we're going to be talking about how he took a 100-year-old business and grew it 100 times in 20 years. And so the goal here is to bring a lot of value to, maybe mom and pop shops that are looking to grow, or even just other fabrication companies that, maybe need a little bit of inspiration. We're gonna have a lot of value. So this is gonna be broken down into multiple episodes. And so just to kick it off, I'm gonna have Matthew talk a little bit about the history of Nix Companies, and maybe just give us a brief overview of who Nix Companies is.
Sure.
And then why you guys decided to launch ProFab Alliance.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. Thanks for having me on here, and it's exciting to get this project kicked off, and hope we have a little nuggets of value to share with our listeners here. I'm a huge advocate of utilizing podcasts and other content for learning, and so many of the things that we've implemented or integrated into our business today come from podcasts I've listened to and other folks in the industry and outside. And so I'm really excited to be able to hopefully share some of that with others. So Nix Companies is a family holding company that my brother and I formed several years back, and our primary holding is our fifth generation legacy family business, which started as a blacksmith shop in the late 1800s actually. And our great-great-grandfather came to Poseyville, Indiana, the town we're in today, in 1902 and started. So we say since 1902, the business has been uninterrupted here in this town, from a blacksmith to a mom and pop welding shop to a modern fabrication, manufacturing, industrial contracting company. And so that's the core business that we're going to mostly talk about here today, the story. So our parent company, we have other investments and other holdings, but we're primarily talking about Nix, our core manufacturing business today.
Awesome. And, obviously you're co-founder of the ProFab Alliance. We're doing this podcast. Just give a little bit of a background why the ProFab Alliance even exists.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of our growth has come about through acquisition, but we've also done some startups. And so we really have a very decentralized business model, meaning we have a small home office with shared administrative services, business development and administrative. And then we have multiple locations, 8 now actually, that operate independently. They're all small businesses, so they're all very similar to, your stereotypical fabrication or machine shop, anywhere from 10 to 20 team members there, and anywhere from 1.5 to 15 million in revenue, depending on the location. So pretty much the core. If you go across the country, you'll find these shops everywhere. And so we sort of assembled a cluster of them, and then to enable us to bring those together and allow them to operate with autonomy, but also have the economies of scale and have the benefits of being a larger company, we've had to put a lot of systems and processes in place over the years, and we've learned by trial and error. And we feel like the systems and processes, the product, if you will, that we've developed to do that, we feel like there's a lot of value to other fabricators beyond us, that beyond the businesses that we could acquire or partner with. And so we feel like, frankly, we have something to offer, and there's a business model there, and anytime you can help others and have a positive economic model, I think it's something something worthwhile. So that's what led us to where we are today. And lastly, I'll say Adam Schmidt, who's our Vice President of Business Development Administration, he has a passion for coaching and consulting, and he's really been the brains behind the development of so much of our product and services. And so he's our managing director of the new business ProFab Alliance, and he's a big reason why we've forged ahead with this project.
I think it's great to have that background. When someone's listening to this and or watching it, and they get to hear like, okay, so what's the point of why are they doing this? But they may also ask, what makes Nix uniquely qualified? And I think that's a lot of what the 100X story is, and that's how we're going to refer to this as the 100X story, right? Yep. And so I want to get right into it. I think this first episode is really going to be, laying the groundwork where we talk about the history of Nix. And so I know you've given this talk a lot, so I'm going to kind of just, let you take it away and talk about, why knowing the history is so important to where you were able to make the visions and all that to grow the business. So.
Sure. Yeah, you got to understand the history. I tell our team members that all the time too. To understand who we are today and why we do things the way we do them, it's important to understand the history and the values behind that. So, as I said earlier, my great-great-grandfather immigrated from Germany, started our business as a blacksmith shop, and he turned it over to his oldest. There's 5 boys, turned it over to the oldest of the boys, and interestingly enough, we're 5th generation, but there's actually been an extra transition in there. There was a big enough age gap between the oldest and the youngest, so they turned it over to the youngest son. The oldest brothers did, which happened to be my great-grandpa. And again, a blacksmith shop here in Poseyville, Indiana. He bought the first welding machine in 1940 or 41. It's in our lobby today, and we've put a cool little metalworking museum, which you've seen in our lobby, going all the way back to the blacksmith equipment that he had from the 1800s up to, we have a lathe in there now, and then I tell people the rest of the museum's out on the shop floor because we still use a lot of it. But so anyways, we got the first welding machine in 1940, and that's when we really started to transition from a blacksmith to a welding shop. And that was a big step then. He didn't have a YouTube video to learn how to weld. He taught himself how to weld, and he left, essentially was leaving that art form behind of blacksmithing. So I can imagine that was a big deal back then. And had he not done that, we wouldn't be around today. And so when we're thinking about being innovative or thinking about taking risks on new equipment, I always point to that part of our story. So from then, my grandfather joined him in the business in the 50s, and they built a new shop, which is just adjacent to where our main office is today. The original shop was on a dirt floor, small wooden frame dirt floor building here in downtown Poseyville, and then they moved to where we are today in the 50s. Grandpa and great-grandpa were doing, it was a very typical mom and pop welding shop in an ag community. We're fixing broken farm equipment, occasionally, welding or fabricating a small part for the farmers, and we worked for a lot of the transportation industry, truck drivers and construction equipment and so forth. And you can't throw a dart at the map of this, especially the Midwest of the United States, without hitting a little town that has a shop like this in it. They're all over, and just great people, like just hardworking, middle-class, blue-collar people that are like a staple in the community. Everybody knows the guy that owns the welding shop. And so, I got to be a part of that growing up. It was really cool. When I joined, or when I was a kid working alongside great-grandpa was gone by then. Grandpa and my dad, in the early 90s in the shop, still pretty much the same shop that they started in the 50s. They added on a little bit. We were starting to do a little bit of commercial fabrication then, but it wasn't until when my brother and I got involved and really took it to the next level that we became the commercial industrial business we are today. So I grew up working there in the summers, sweeping the floor, cleaning the chips out of the machine. Anybody that knows about the industry that we're in knows about what I mean when I say the chips, all the pieces that come off the machines, and pushing them into a bucket and come home black head to toe, and swept the floor, cleaned the machines, and then started learning how to weld. I started on the bandsaw, cutting parts on the saw or in the iron worker, and eventually learned how to weld, and then throughout high school, in my senior year of high school, I worked half a day in the shop. I went to school in the morning, and we had a program where you could do that, co-op, and so I did that. And then went to Vincennes University for 1 year for welding technology, and then came back to the family business, went right to work. And so that's kind of the very, very abbreviated version of what led to the 5th generation. So that's quite a condensed story of the first 4 generations, and my dad really started getting us into the commercial industrial fabrication a little bit. He had a real knack for doing high quality work, and I think he kind of helped start the movement for us from just a welding shop that fixed broken equipment to, hey, we can do more than that. And he was doing it on a small scale, but had he not done that, I wouldn't have saw that aspect of the business, and I don't know if I would have stuck around in the business, because I was really drawn to that side of the business I think now I appreciate fixing stuff more. But when you're young, you're drawn to the new and the shiny, and so fabricating new things, I was more attracted to that. And so I'm thankful that Dad started pushing us that way, and that gave us the platform to really catapult to where we are today.
That's awesome. Talk about a little bit about that. We're wanting to hit on the history and how it kind of, like you said, catapulted you guys into where you guys went, and obviously. There's a transition to where you start having this vision for the company. But before then, I would say, what from the history of the business really brought what is there values that you learn from the history that are still relevant to Nix today? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about core values, that's a very cliche thing, right? A lot of companies, and we do too, have core values. I mean, you really think about what is that? What does the core part of core value mean? And I think it's something that lives inside you. And there are pieces of the way they did things that I have left behind, but there's pieces that I've kept. And I think for me, those are the core values and the core values that we hang on the wall today and that are on our website and that we talk about are an offshoot of that. But what lived inside me were the things that I took away from that. And so. Some of those, you won't see these in our core values, but I'll just talk about beliefs that I hold deeply that I think manifested themselves in our values and the way we operate our business. So first and foremost, that getting dirty and working hard to make a living is not anything to be ashamed of. It's something to really be proud of. And I think we're seeing a resurgence of that today as a society. There's appropriately so, there's a big resurgence of trades and blue collar work, but seeing my dad and my grandpa live the lifestyle that they lived, which was a good one, very solidly middle class lifestyle, and had flexibility to, they didn't travel, they just had a lot of flexibility. They just lived a great life, and they did it by getting dirty every day, and my dad would come to my ball games after work in his work uniform, dirty, and so I grew up around that. And it's just something that that I carry with me, that I interact with all of our production team members, and I feel like I'm one of them because I came from that and I'm used to that, and I think it's just something to be proud of. And so therefore we have a culture of really celebrating our team members and the people that are out on the floor, out in the field doing the work. So that's part of what I took away. Another part I would say is just the customer service aspect of it. Which can sound really cliche, but I saw people come to us broke down, trying to plant corn, and it's going to rain tomorrow, and they need to get the corn in the ground, and we're there to help them in a tough time, and never taking advantage of them. If anything, we talked ourselves out of a lot of work because we would simplify things for them or not sell them something that they thought they needed and didn't really need. And so I just saw my dad and grandpa. Literally talking themselves out of work in situations to save the customer money, or sometimes it would take too long to do a job and they would not charge the full price for the job because they didn't feel like it was fair, and those are the kind of things that you might take a short-term impact, but allow your business to be around a long time, So you can read all that stuff in a book, but I watched it play out in real life. I think those are a couple couple big ones that stick out to me. I mean, there's a lot more that we could unpack there, but I think just that hard work, treating people fairly, and just doing things the right way, which all sounds so like cliche and overused, right? But when you see it, like when you get to experience it in real life, it impacts you different than reading like, this is how you should run a business. I mean, the things I just said, anybody would tell you that's how you should run a business. But it's one thing to say it or read it, and it's another to do it. And so, it's hard to do that over time, and we don't always get it right, but I got to see that lived out in a good way. And so those are things I carried with me as a foundation.
That's awesome. And I'll say, you said that was cliche, but I think that was right there. I think the listeners will take that as a knowledge nugget, because even when you start to grow, when you make that pivot from, maybe you're a mom and pop shop, or maybe you're just a one-man band and you're starting to hire people onto your team, you have to remember those values, and you have to remember to always be honest and all of that. And I think, a testimonial for Nix is that, and the reason we're talking about the history part is that they basically made it to that 100-year mark without growing any more than organically, having another son or having, a daughter or someone, right?
It's a great point. Yeah. So they defied the odds. I mean, there's an old saying, if you're not growing, you're dying, which I actually believe in, but I think if you would look at our story, you'd say, well, how's that true? But I think you have to look at a big enough snapshot of history, right? So they were still growing in certain ways, and toward the end, if we don't make some changes, we could start to die. But they stayed small mom and pop for 100 years, which is incredible. Usually a business in 100 years is going to really grow or it's going to die. But they were able to innovate in small ways, and they evolved with the times, but were able to stay small, and they desired to do that. I mean, they would have plenty of opportunity to grow the business over 100 years, but they didn't. It was still, whenever I joined, it was my dad, my grandpa, and my aunt, my dad's sister, and she worked in the office, but she also worked in the shop. I mean, she ran a lathe and drill press, and she got out there and got dirty with everybody else. So very very traditional mom and pop family business.
That's awesome. So I think, for a kickoff of this 100X story, I think we're basically wrapping up here. What is one takeaway, in regards to growing the business 100X, and why we separate out the history part, the fourth generations, and then feel free, if it's natural, to tease your vision stuff that starts coming up in the fifth generation. That's what we'll kind of cover in the next episode. But why is it important that we talk about the history of Nix, as part of the 100X journey?
Yeah, I mean, several things. One, I mean, the natural inclination when I say I'm a leader of a fifth generation business is to think that, there was probably something pretty substantial there when you got there, and I'm not, as you just heard, I mean, I have a lot of admiration and respect for the four generations before me. So I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to claim that I'm the founder of this business today. However, the reality is it looks and feels a lot more like a second gen business than a fifth gen. I mean, it just does. I mean, it was so mom and pop when we started. And so you have to listen to the first episode that we just are wrapping up here to really understand when we're starting this 100X story, where are we starting from? And we were starting from a very small mom and pop family business, again, that looks and feels a lot more like a first gen, just because it's stayed, the same size all those years. And that was the foundation we were starting for. And it was truly a foundation. I mean, we wouldn't have done what we did had we not had that foundation to build on, and in that legacy became a big part of our brand, and it still is today. We've really leveraged that foundational part of our brand. And so the 100X story starts, in essence, when I came back to the business full time. We didn't really start the growth journey for years later, but I think that's where we should pick up in the next episode of, starting full time in the business, and my young ambitions to grow, and the battles that caused, until we got to the point where we really took off.
I think that to end this episode and to tease the next episode, What your dad used to say to you? What, that you were stupid, or I don't know about wanting to grow the business. What was that saying?
Yeah, just young and dumb enough to do it, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is not entirely untrue, but.
So keep listening. Click on the next episode. So hopefully, after you've heard this episode, the next one up and going, we'll talk about Matthew as he goes full time into the business and he starts laying out his vision. That's what we're going to talk about on the next episode. So thanks for listening.
Yep. Thank you.
Cool.